What's up, folks? My name is Matty Willz, and I'd like to invite you all to join us on this brand new journey, a brand new digital feature that we've been working on, and it's super important, and you'll all understand why that is in just a few minutes. It's called Mental Mondays with Matty Willz, and each week we'll be talking to a different expert that specializes in a different classification of mental health and mental health well-being. So with all that said, without further ado, let's welcome our first guest, Mr. Rayshawn Johnson, a man with many titles, a very smart man. He's probably spent 100 more years in school than I ever did, and we appreciate him coming on and being our first guest. So, Rayshawn, I know we just talked about your title. I know you're working on soon to be a doctor, right? I mean, we're gonna have to
Yes,
address you as
sir.
doctor the next time we talk. Tell everybody, exactly what it is that you do and what you're working on.
No, yeah, appreciate you for having me. And yes, so my name is Rayshawn Johnson, and I am currently a PhD student, so working on my PhD in counseling psychology in the fourth and final year of that. So I'm in the internship slash dissertation phase of that. And with my internship, I'm working at a counseling center in Columbus, Ohio, at a local college. And then also with regard to my dissertation, it's focused on just identifying the impact that hip hop has on the identity development of young Black professionals, how it can be beneficial to um, essentially helping them navigate working in predominantly white environments that were required them to code switch, and just trying to see like how hip hop can be beneficial in terms of helping those individuals navigate themselves and navigate their identities. And throughout the process, I've been learning a lot about myself and the community. So I'm just excited to be here and to chat with you all. And yeah, so thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate you coming on with us. And, I was very interested in how you are relating hip hop to mental health. I thought that was super cool. We'll chat about that in just a little bit. But I kind of just want to open up with, I know that you have a brand, right? And your brand is like perfect for what we're talking about right now. The hashtag is Did You Self Care Today? And I was scrolling, I was looking on your IG feed earlier today. I see that you're heavily involved in this. This is something that's very important to you. So I would like for you to just explain to everybody what exactly it did inspired that hashtag, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Yeah, so it started because I realized in my field there wasn't a lot of attention to self-care in general. And I think there's a recent influx within like the past summer, within the past year, kind of related to the pandemic and things like that.
Mhm.
But not really a lot of attention to it just for ourselves or just like for our clients that we worked with. So I wanted to really be able to incorporate that just into my own personal life, into like the journey of individuals that I care about in my community in general. And as I mentioned, just there's not a lot of attention to it. We in the society that we typically in the society that we're a part of, excuse me, there's like a mentality to kind of go, hustle, grind, work hard, but you don't really hear too much about taking care of yourself, having compassion for yourself. So that's kind of where it piqued my interest, because I knew that it was important. And then in doing research, you find that it's I mean, essentially imperative to use self care, because you can come back more productive. You can come back just like in a stronger mind. You come back more energized and things of that regard. So I just wanted to really incorporate that into all of the work that I did. And then for myself, with the recent pandemic, I realized that a lot of the people that I were talking to they were struggling. I seen like a lot of people struggling mentally on social media and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of have an outlet via social media. So I use my own personal platform to just create various mental health tips to provide to people as like an outreach opportunity. Um, and then just really being intentional about telling people to self-care every day. So that when we hear, even when we do talk about self-care, it's not something that we typically would do all the time. It's like, oh, I went on vacation a few months ago. That was my self-care. But we don't really have like an intentional self-care journey. So I just wanted people to think about it on a daily aspect, even if it's something super small. Especially since we were going through the pandemic, it was a very difficult time. So just wanting people to constantly think about engaging in self-care, different skills to self-care and things of that regard. So I wanted to just
That's
be more intentional about that.
No, for sure. It's super interesting. And sometimes when we hear these sayings, self-care, it can kind of become like a cliched back of the mind thing. But if you had to just kind of dumb it down or simplify it, what are some of the foundational ideas associated with self-care? And why are they important?
Yeah, so I think some of the foundational, I'll just kind of give like four quick ones, quick foundational aspects of self-care. And like one being that it's not a self-indulgence. So many times people think that they're like wasting time or just kind of doing it to procrastinate or maybe refrain from their responsibilities or things like that. So just kind of like reminding people that it's quite the opposite of that. It helps you, like I mentioned earlier, come back more productive, come back stronger and of sound mind. That it's not a selfish thing to do. Like it's actually one of the more selfless things that people can do is by taking care of themselves. Just with regard to, we all heard the adage, you can't pour from an empty cup. So being able to like do things for yourself and be able to take time to yourself, take time away from socials or time away from like responsibilities, giving yourself time to really pour into yourself, re-energize and recharge your battery, you can then come back stronger with working, being the confidant for other people, being a support system for people, and also just like being productive at work and things like that. Another foundation is that it's not that one-time experience. So it's something that we can do consistently. It's something that we can do with little to like no money or resources as well. It can be as simple as just cutting off your phone for like 10 minutes and not like responding to people, or just sitting down and like maybe reminiscing on some fun times that you had in the past as well. So it can be like very subtle things that we can include as self-care, and there's like no real definition except for what we define. And then also, it doesn't have to be time consuming. It can be something quick and easy. Like it doesn't have to be a planned vacation. It could be by my self-care, I'm going to just ensure that I drink the amount of fluids that I'm supposed to drink in terms of water, or I'm not going to drink alcohol this weekend, something along those lines. And that's what I think of like are the foundations, just something that's intentional, something that you set as, this is self-care. This is something to benefit me. And, along the lines of other things I mentioned as well.
For sure. And one of the things that you said was super interesting. And I know in this, modern world that we live in, near impossible for some people, turning off your phone for 10 minutes sounds like, an eternity in some people's eyes, especially, if we work in media. So we feel like we might miss 3 weeks worth of information if we turn our phone off for 10 minutes. Why do you think it's important to disengage from social media and just from your phone in general as a form of self-care?
Yeah, so I think it's important primarily because we're constantly kind of glued. Well, I don't even say glued, but when we are kind of indulged in our phone, or we're over engaged in it, like the screen time super high and things like that, we're missing out on a lot of like life and a lot of present moments. So just in terms of like going out and looking at the sky, walking into nature and walking through the park or things like that, like we're kind of missing out on those things. And then with regard to the social media element, a lot of the things that we see on social media, and I love social media myself, so I'll kind of start with that too. But it's not often positive images that we see, or it's things that we feel we have to compare ourselves to. Why doesn't my house look like so and so's? Why don't I have as much money, or why am I not having as much fun as this person? So then we start to maybe like think negatively about ourselves in that regard, and it can just kind of lead to more self-deprecating thoughts and things like that. So I don't think that using social media or using phones is bad per se, but just taking that time to unplug can give you a moment to be present, a moment to appreciate what's around you, to lean on support, and things of that regard.
For sure. That reminds me of my grandmother. She used to say, too much of anything is a bad thing. So that
Yeah.
kind of feeds right along into that. So that's a super good tip right there. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit. You even mentioned it when we opened up about COVID-19. I mean, right now, the last 18 months, 24 months, maybe, completely different world than what most of us, especially us adults, are used to. So just in your experience, what are some of the things that people can do to maintain their well-being mentally, mental health wise, when it comes to this pandemic?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that as well, because it's like so pressing right now. And I think one of the main things we can do is like just kind of set intention about like the amount of stress that we'll consume, or even just being intentional about how we respond to stress and things like that. So with this pandemic, like it's obviously been hard on many people because we can't connect in the same ways that we used to. We can't go out and things like that. So also just being intentional about finding new ways to care for yourself, new hobbies and things like that. So we may not be able to like connect at parties with friends, for example, but we can go to the park outdoors and, kind of safely gather and distance in that regard. Or we can, we can, and I recognize that there's privilege in this as well, but like Netflix party and Disney party and things like that, like you can kind of like watch shows and movies with friends on like those platforms as well.
Wow.
But for like people who may not have access to that, I think like, going outdoors or like trying to connect in that regard can be helpful. Being intentional about like the amount of time that we spend on screens, or like just trying to
Mhm.
look into new things like meditating, look into new things like changing up our diet, because that has a lot of impact on our mental health, being intentional about getting sleep, contacting friends that we may not have heard in a while. It's I recognize that it is hard, but there's still ways to kind of like, get out and navigate that as well.
Absolutely. And I just want to remind all the viewers that, we'll have a list of resources available that we'll include at the end of this video. So just hang on and we'll get to some of those more specifically.
Hmm.
But, you kind of talked about this a little bit too. There's been such a shift in the way people operate their lives on a daily basis. Namely, a lot of people are forced to work from home now. And
Yeah.
if you're a person that lives by yourself, you could find yourself being at home a lot. What are some of the tips that you have for people who do work from home? And then if you can just kind of touch on what kind of balance should a person have between being alone and then intentionally trying to be around people, whether it's their friends, family, partners, or whoever it may be?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think I'll go ahead and start with the working from home piece, because I think that that's like a very essential part of this experience as well. So like number one, I think people should be intentional about like creating a space where they work, because it's very easy to kind of like allow the work life to really infiltrate like our home life, especially since we're all working from home now. So like maybe even if it's like a corner, if you don't have an entire room to create as an office, like maybe in this particular corner, I'll set up like a little area to work from home. I'll be intentional about like wearing particular outfits. If it's business casual or business, I'll wear that in this area. And then like right after clocking out, like I'll be sure to like change clothes or like go straight to the
Mm,
shower or something like that. Also setting your schedule too can be helpful, because I,
that's a good point.
even like for myself, this is something I've got to get better about. I've noticed that when I work from home, I don't really make as much time for like lunch or things like that, or I may like work a little bit longer into my break because I'm not really acknowledging that. So like setting timers, setting schedules and things like that. So at this point I'll take a break. At this point I may like start laundry or something like that. Limiting that media consumption again, because that can increase the amount of time that you're there as well. So maybe like checking it like sparingly on breaks, or checking it when you're home or something, when you're off of the clock or something like that, so you can
Mhm.
increase like decrease the amount of time that you can spend at home versus at work. Being intentional about taking those breaks, and then also just like cutting yourself some slack, because it is a hard time, and a lot of times we got to be able to extend ourselves grace in this moment too. And it's easy to get down on ourselves or be hard on ourselves, or think, this is difficult, like why do I have to do this? But just be patient with yourself in this moment as well. Or just like a few of the tips that I have for people working from home. And setting boundaries too can be helpful. So like being able to say no and saying yes to yourself instead.
Yeah, and then, is it important for people, especially like if you got kids at home and stuff like that, you may be begging for some alone time. But if you
Right.
are a person who, you may be single, or maybe you're an older person that lives by yourself,
Mhm.
how focused should you be, or how intent should you be on making sure that you do find time to be among other people?
Yeah, and with that, I think that kind of folds into just really recognizing the amount of time that you're comfortable with spending like alone,
Mm,
and being honest about that too. So if you start to notice that you're isolating for just the sake of isolating, or like people are reaching out and you're ignoring those phone calls, that may be a sign that you should probably like make more attempts to get out. And I know that's not always easy, like it can be very difficult when you're in those mind states, but just like really trying to like be intentional about, hey, I'm going to respond to this text, or hey, I am going to like reach back out to this person. Um, so if you notice you're doing more isolating, or notice that you may be more irritable and things like that, that may be a sign that you've got to reach out to someone. So like knowing within yourself like how much time you can have alone, um, knowing whether or not like what your interaction style. If you are an introvert, you may get your battery charged from being alone. If you're an extrovert, then just finding some of the ways that I mentioned before, like trying to spend intentional time going to the park, or spending intentional time watching those shows, or catching up about things that you enjoy. If you're comfortable with taking a trip or something like that, maybe planning a trip with someone, something along those lines. But just being honest too about what you're comfortable with and what you will tolerate. And I've also saw like along social, like kind of floating around social media, where the idea of people doing friend contracts, which I thought was like really cool. Like,
hmm.
we will only hang around these particular people just to ensure that we're not doing too much, we're not being unsafe, or we know that we're taking the pandemic seriously. So this is like kind of like the packed group that we have, where we may be able to go over each other's house, or spend time in that regard.
Yeah, a
Mhm.
lot of interesting things you said there. One of the things that I just feel like is a theme is really being true to yourself and understanding what you need personally. And it,
Yeah,
what may work for me may not work for you or the next person. So having that open kind of I mean, nobody wants to really say that they talk to themselves, but having that open
yeah,
dialogue with themselves, with yourself, trying to figure out just exactly what you're comfortable with. I think that's a really, really great point. And everything is not a cookie cutter situation. So I thought that was pretty dope. Let's transition to some of the things that you are kind of that you specialize in, that you care about. When I read your bio, you said, I
hmm
want to get this right. You said using hip hop as a tool for identity development. Obviously, we're a
hmm
hip hop station. I think that people would love to hear exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times, like, we don't really see hip hop as factoring into our identity, and so I'll kind of like give a little insight of why I got involved. So everything I do, I eat, sleep, breathe, breakfast hip hop. Like, I love hip hop, love talking hip hop, and I wanted to really incorporate that into my research. People kept saying research is me search and things like that. So I'm like, how can I incorporate that in a way that feels applicable to me and applicable to my community? So just kind of like incorporated that with the identity that we have at work. Like, even like now, I'm kind of code switching and changing the way that I'm talking and things like that to come across as more professional and things like that. But with hip hop, like, we think about the way that we dress, like in terms of fashion. We think about the way that we speak. Like, some people learn how to talk to romantic partners from hip hop songs or like R&B songs and things like that. And just like how much of that has played into the way that we view ourselves, like, or like viewing, like, or identifying with certain artists in the industry. Like, people may have gathered like more of the professional, or like grind mentality that I mentioned earlier may come from like a Rick Ross, or may come from like a Jay-Z, or they may like have learned how to explore their emotions, or through like a LL Cool J song, or like may have learned how to like explore social injustice, or how to really address that or advocate for themselves through like a Kendrick or J. Cole song. So just like the various ways that it may have impacted you, and one of the main things I think of is like language and fashion. So like, we get so much of our jargon, our slang from hip hop. So much of the way that we dress comes from that as well. So we're just wondering, like, if I was the only person that it influenced so much of my identity and so much of the way that I view myself, and view and my perspective on life and things like that, how were other people impacted by it? How can that shift help us like be more of ourselves and be more authentic in the workspace? So just kind of like jump started that research in that regard.
Wow, very interesting indeed. So I want you to shout out your socials so we can get everybody to follow you and follow up with you. But I do have one more question. I've been seeing a lot of it. Just seems like mental health awareness is more to the forefront now than I've ever seen in my life. I'm 38 years old. You're
Uh-huh.
seeing athletes taking mental health breaks and things of that nature. It's just
Right.
seemingly a topic of conversation on a daily basis. With that, though, I also see a bunch of apps offering therapy sessions, and I see a bunch of people just talking about therapy in general. So I
Mhm.
just want, from your opinion, how important is therapy? And do you think that everybody needs therapy?
Yeah, so I am very biased in that, and I'll just be honest by saying that. So I
Sure.
do think everyone can benefit from therapy personally. Um, I won't go as far as saying everybody should go to therapy, because again, like, I think that's a conversation that people have to have with themselves and kind of like address it in that regard. But I also recognize that, like, therapy can be a really privileged experience. Like, it can be a barrier to care. It can be expensive and things like that. So while I do think everyone should go, at the same time, it's still um, pretty telling that like it's expensive. So that's one of the main things I'm working on, is trying to like reduce that barrier to care, and like help people like understand like more imperative ways to go to therapy. But in terms of like, do I think everyone should go? I think there's like still, even though there's like the influx of mental health awareness and things of that regard, there's still kind of that like taboo experience around mental health, or like seeking mental health.
Hmm.
Um, so I think with that, it just comes like with that. I think I'll just kind of respond to that by saying, you don't have to seek therapy because there's something wrong, or like, there's something wrong, or you've experienced like complex trauma or things like that. You can go if you want to want it to be more preventative, or you want to just learn skills in case you experience intense anxiety or bouts of depression or things like that. But I will say, like, there are ways to kind of find with that barrier to care. Like, I've also like looked into some ways that can be like therapy can be more affordable. So like one way is you can like contact like your insurance provider if you do have insurance. If someone does have insurance, like typically people will offer like EAPs where you can get like 5 free sessions typically per issue. And like they're very fluid on the amount of issues that you can kind of change as well. Typically, like you can kind of like one time you can go and say, oh, I'm seeking services for for work-life balance, for example. And then the next time it can be, I'm trying to learn skills for self-care. The next is skills for anxiety. So now that's like 15 sessions for free that you've had like in a year, for example. And you can kind of change those issues as you go. A lot of therapists will also offer like sliding scale fees. So you can ask about that, and they will offer resources based on like the amount that you're willing to pay. And they can go down like pretty low based on like income and things like that. It's like based on your fixed income. Community mental health providers also can offer like low rate insurance. So like, for example, when I was an intern in Memphis, I worked at a facility where you would not pay more than $20 for a therapy session.
Wow.
And I thought that was like very helpful for the community in terms of access.
For sure.
Clinicians in training can be there as well. Like if you contact various sites in your area, they may have trainees there who are offering pro bono services. And then like group therapy is typically like more accessible as well. So just kind of wanted to like offer those as reduced barrier to care if that was one of the things that were coming up for people. There's kind of ways to kind of work around that as well. Also, some therapists will offer like bartering systems. So if you're like an artist, for example, and you were like, hey, I don't have much to pay for this, but I have this painting. Like, could I have a session if I provide you this painting? And it's just really just based on like what therapists are comfortable with and things like that. But just wanted to kind of throw that out as well.
No, for sure. Really good information. Everything that you said was brilliant. And I'm just sitting here listening to you talk. This is literally exactly why we're doing this, because there are so many people that have this wealth of knowledge, and we just need to pour it out there, man, and get it out there to the people. We all know we're a hip hop station. We know who our demographic is, and it's important to us to show them people that look like us talking about the things that we all need to know. So I definitely thank you for joining us. This was a great episode, and I'm sure we'll be hitting you up somewhere down the line. You'll probably be a doctor by that time, so we'll have to change your little graphic at the bottom. But much success and congratulations and good luck to you on the rest of your endeavors. I know you'll do great. I do got to get you out of here with this question, and I do want you to just let everybody know where they can reach you at social media wise. But you're such a hip hop fan, I can't not ask you, Donda or CLB. I can't not ask you, bro. I can't not ask you.
For the first week, I was CLB, but slowly but surely, when I pay more attention and like listen, it's definitely Donda all day.
Yeah. I will give the content to Donda. I would give the vibe to CLB. It just kind of depends on what kind of mood you're in. But let everybody know where they can reach you, bro.
Yeah, so my socials I'm Box Jetson on all socials, and that's Box Jetson with 2 X's. So BOXX JETSON, like the cartoon. And feel free to like follow me on social media, but like Twitter, Instagram. I'm pretty active on both. My Instagram, I have like a lot of graphics and things like that are also dedicated to self-care. Some of the tips that I like use for today as well. So feel free to like reach out to those. And then also, as Matty mentioned, I'll be sure to include like the link to the various resources that I think will be very beneficial to people as well.
For sure. We'll definitely get them that. I just want to say thank you one more time. I think that was perfect, and we appreciate you. And I'm speaking on behalf of the team. I know they're going to say the same thing. So thank you, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right. Yeah, thanks a lot, Matty, and take care.
All right, peace.